This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So before we get into the teisho proper, a few words about the practice of teisho. Teisho is not a break from our practice. During teisho, if we're working on a koan, we continue to work on the koan. If we're doing a breath practice, we continue to do our breath practice. In other words, we practice as the teisho. We let the words in like the sound of the wind in the trees, and we let them go. We don't cogitate on them. If we start letting go of our practice and start just thinking about the teisho's moved on. Here we are thinking over here, and the teisho's already gone to here. However, if it's too complex to both attend to the practice and to listen to the teisho, really to let it in, to be the teisho, then let the listening take precedence. In other words, really become one with the listening. Make listening your practice, and just attend to the teisho fully. But it's not a lecture. It's not something to sit there and think about and make notes in your head about. It's to be this, hear these words, experience it right in the present. It's a mode of practice, just like kinhin is not just walking, it's a mode of walking practice. So, today is December 8th. In the Buddhist calendar, of course, this is the most important of all dates. The catchphrase is 2,500 years ago, but really it could be 2,800. Modern research is pushing it historically back further. The Buddha actually existed, a person. Of course, there are many legends about him, but the legend that is most significant for Zen practice is that 25, 26, 27, 2,800 years ago, on the 8th day of the 12th month, after facing the devastating reality of impermanence, it struck him like a thunderbolt because he wasn't inoculated like we are every day, growing up with understanding things fade, things grow old, things sicken, people are going to die. We know this, and so it's not a shock to us in the same way that it hit him at the age of 29, and he had the courage not to turn away from it, not to run, not to build a better palace and more protections around himself, more amusements, more diversions. He determined to look right into the root of it, which is what Zen practice is all about. And on December 8th, as he glanced up at the morning star after a long night of zazen, after actually 6 years of totally sustained practice without any breaks whatsoever, he experienced the complete falling away of all self-centeredness. The entire universe stepped in. He found his own home. He found his own nature. After that, even though he had only a robe and a begging bowl, he was said to be the richest person in the world. And it's because of his trauma and his commitment to getting to the root of it, the really fundamentally human root of really all that torments us when you think about it, we're able to practice today. We're able, because of this one person's effort, to find a bit of peace and wisdom and compassion, not as belief systems, but as a practice we can actually mature as human beings through and with. So with that as a foundation, we'll look at the Buddha's enlightenment. Today is the day, December 8th, when he glanced at the morning star, touching the earth. It's a wonderful image, we'll get into it, that in Buddhist tradition, he didn't look up to the sky and beg for help from up above. He touched the earth. We as human beings are forgetting to touch the earth. It's a wonderfully sustaining image. He touched the earth, glanced at the morning star, and was confirmed in realization. So, at the age of 29, and I'm reading again from A Zen Life of Buddha, a book of mine from last year, published by Sumeru Press. At the age of 29, the sheltered prince of the Shakya clan, Siddhartha Gautama, really saw and took in the facts of impermanence. Having seen an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and last of all, a homeless truth seeker, he was precipitated into a struggle for truth that was to persist until Buddhahood, full realization of all our own mind's potential for wisdom, compassion, understanding, all of it, was realized. So it wasn't just Kensho, it wasn't just Satori, let's say. It was a full actualization of all the dormant potential of the human mind for wisdom, compassion, goodness. Leaving the palace, he rode to the river boundary of his father's kingdom. There, at the river's edge, he severed his attachment to palace life, cutting off his long hair with a sword stroke. At the time, most Indian nobility had long hair. He cut it off. Cut away all that past life. There was only this moment here and his practice into the unknown. Crossing the river, the boundary, he left his sheltered life of luxury and ease. Just like that, after 4 days of seeing the rug pulled out from under his feet, he had enough of it. He said, enough with all that. What's real? Pretty astonishing. After 4 days, he said, that's it. That old life is gone. I'm going into this and see what's really going on. And he disappeared alone into the forest and mountains, that is, into the wilderness. The wilderness is right here with our breath. Where does this breath come from? Where does this next thought come from? Now, we're in the wilderness all the time. The natural world is right here. It is our own nature. He made his way to the hermitages of the two most noted religious teachers of his time. Mastering their methods, he found no lasting freedom from birth, old age, sickness, and death. He found useful things, beneficial things. Meditation is good. It's not to knock it, but it wasn't the solution. It wasn't the root yet. It was helpful, it was good, but it wasn't true insight. And so he moved on from that too. He left that too, and went to truly isolated places that held terror for an ex-city boy like himself. Deep forests, graveyards, charnel grounds, and there he forced himself to undergo the most fearful austerities, reducing his intake of food until he was eating first 1,000, then 100, then 10, then at last just one single sesame seed a day. His flesh withered, his eyes sank into their sockets, his hair rotted and fell out. Every rib, each bony socket and joint stood out exposed like the wreck of a ship when the tide withdraws. In the Zendo now, for probably through December, we'll see, when you get to the stairs, either coming up or going down at the top, you'll see a figure of the Buddha undergoing these austerities, carved out of stone. Every rib is visible, every bony socket is visible. It's a testament to how serious he was about his practice. He was pushing himself beyond all reasonable bounds. This is not a model to follow. It's simply a testament to what he was willing to go through to realize how precious enlightenment, realization, our own nature, understanding it, awakening to it, really is. He gave up all wealth, all power, and then pushed himself to the point of almost killing himself, really. Tremendous determination. But again, this is not a model to follow. He rejects asceticism in the end, realizing that it was a dead end and almost literally killed him. But he had to find out if it would lead to enlightenment, and if it did, he was willing to risk it. That's the model. To be willing to be serious doesn't mean to kill yourself or become an extremist in practice or an ascetic. It means to be serious about engaging with your practice in your own life, because there is something really important that when we miss it, our life is never quite what it could be. Doesn't mean we're suddenly transformed into everything we've ever wanted to be. Not at all. It does mean you find your presence, your home on this earth, on this planet. There's a kind of underlying peace that he felt was so valuable. He was willing, essentially, to do anything to find it. After 6 years of these kinds of efforts, exhausted and at the point of death, he collapsed, more a skeleton wound with sinews and veins than a living man. You'll see that when you look at that carving. It's a very traditional image. There's a very famous image in India that is our carving is modeled on. It's a hand-carved piece of stone, but it captures very much this very famous carved stone figure in India, showing the Buddha as an ascetic. The seriousness of his effort. Again, not a model to follow. It's something he rejected, but he, given his karma, had to go through. Our karma is most likely going to be quite different than that. His great effort had failed. For all his willful exertions, he'd found no great truth and no release from birth, sickness, aging, and death. Now it seemed he must die without attaining his goal. The bitterness of that moment, after 6 years of unrelenting, imagine being in sesshin with no break for 6 years. That's kind of what it was like. He gave up everything. The bitterness of that moment, and then now the seemingly wasted effort that was almost killing him, must have been beyond belief, really. How painful that moment. And then right there at the dead-end limit of the ascetic path, a memory out of his own childhood came to him. You see, it's always right there. It's part of who we are. It's not something we have to add. And this is the memory. He'd been sitting quietly under a rose apple tree at the annual plowing festival, watching his father, Suddhodana the king, along with all the Shakya clan nobles and poor men, too, alike, plowing the earth together. It was a plowing festival, I guess part of a fertility kind of the earth being recognized as part of the clan culture. He saw the earth breaking open in even, wave-like furrows, the heat shimmering up off the freshly opened soil and shining on the sweat-slicked brows and straining bodies of men and oxen alike, the sun flashing off the gilded traces and horns of the oxen. He heard the senseless, plodding rhythm of hooves and cowbells rolling in a solemn, sea-like way beneath the shriller shouts of the men and the whirring cries of the birds as they dove to peck at and devour, the billowing hordes of insects, blind, glistening grubs, cut worms, and broken bodies of mice, which men, oxen, and plows had left in their wake. The terribly obvious laboring, devouring, suffering, and dying, which went on interminably beneath all the gay surface tinsling of the festival, had broken in upon him then and weighed heavily on his mind. And seated alone, remember he's a child, maybe 6 or 8 or so years old at the time is what the story says. He's seated alone beneath the sweet-smelling rose apple tree, reflecting deeply on the scene before him of the people plowing and his father and the poor men and nobles alike all joined together, and all the insects being killed and the mice and rodents being smashed and the birds whirling down to grab all this stuff that's being released into the fields, reflecting deeply on all this stuff that's going on beneath the wonderful, happy surface of the festival. he enters a condition of samadhi, of complete, a kind of moment of oneness with everything. This happens to all of us at some point in our life. It's not like Zen adds something we don't know. It's more like remembering something that we have known, or that we've half glimpsed. He entered into this profound condition of samadhi, of non-separation. Now, at the brink of death and in the depths of despair, this is the memory that returned to him. And it filled him with energy and sureness, for if he had already glimpsed the way when he was just a child, well-fed, clothed, protected, not out there in the wilderness almost killing himself, then mere punishment of the body or mind was pointless, is what he suddenly saw in terms of gaining realization. So he decided at that moment to eat properly again. And then, as if in an immediate response to this unspoken change of heart, and it's weird how sometimes that happens in life too. You go through some kind of change and what happens around you shifts. I think Jung called that synchronicity, the inner and the outer world mesh. So he gave up asceticism. He saw, no, being a normal person, eating, taking care of yourself, being responsible to the world around you, letting the world be part of who you are. This is not an obstacle to enlightenment at all. In fact, when you try and do extreme stuff, it becomes an obstacle. Not to do that, he's going. So immediately, this girl from a neighboring village, legend records her name was Sujata, or Sujata, was there offering a bowl of milk rice. And when you, after the teisho, if you look at the altar, you'll see the Buddha touching the earth there from Bhutan that we have, is holding a bowl, and in it is milk rice, a kind of porridge made of rice cooked with milk and ghee, probably melted butter, honey maybe. So he accepted her life-saving gift, and at this time, when he had been an ascetic, he was the most ascetic of the ascetics. He had 5 ascetic disciples who were doing asceticism as well. And when they saw him start eating, they thought, oh, well, this ex-prince is caved. You know, he's given up. He's useless. He's eating again. We're out of here. We're not going to follow this guy. And so they get up and leave. And they were convinced he had abandoned the quest for truth and resumed a worldly life. When he had finished eating, he felt strong enough to stand, and leaning on his staff, was able to make his way to the nearby Naranjana River, and he bathed, letting the river wash away 6 years of accumulated dirt and filth. Strangely aware again, as he's coming back to life, of the lilting dance of water, rock and sand, sunlight on leaves. It's like he's coming back to life. Climbing up onto the shore, he announced, remember, this is December 8th. Oh, this would have been the 7th, actually. This would have been on December 7th, as we'll see. If this is the day of my supreme enlightenment, may this bowl float upstream. And he cast his empty offering bowl onto the waters. Kind of magical, mythical, wonderful literary moment here. He throws his bowl onto the stream and says, of course, in Zen, there's the image of the carp. You know, enlightenment doesn't come from going with the flow. I remember being in a workshop, I've mentioned this before, with Robert Bly, the poet, translator, and one of the, really maybe the founding voice of the men's movement many, many years ago. He said, if you always go with the flow, you just end up in the bleeping Gulf of Mexico. In other words, if you just go along with the kind of things you've been doing all along, you end up in the same place you've been trying to get away from all the time. You have to go against the flow. So he throws his bowl onto the stream. and says, if this is the day of my supreme enlightenment, may this bowl float upstream, that is against the current. And in Zen, we have the image of the carp, which leaps up against the current, up the waterfall, to become the dragon it's in reality always been. This is an image of practice, not attaching to our thoughts and going where they take us, but returning again and again to the practice of the practice of move, the practice of experiencing this breath to the count, whatever the practice is, not just getting washed downstream with our thoughts, and not at all, but right where we are. So, as soon as the bowl touched the river surface, it forged upstream to the whirlpool of Kala Nagaraja, the Black Snake King, who dwells on the river bottom. This is a kind of very interesting image. The Nagas, of course, are wise serpent beings. It carries a lot of resonance in many traditions. But the point here is that the Naga has almost like a timeless life. And so it whirls down into the jeweled magical chambers at the river bottom of the Naga King. And it stopped against an endless row of such identically formed bowls. And hearing that little sound, clink of bowl against bowl, the Naga King opens his eyes, raises his ancient hooded head. This is India, so it's a cobra. And announced, yesterday a Buddha arose. Today there shall be another Buddha. Svaha, awake, rejoice. Last time a Buddha had arisen on this planet was world ages in the past. And here it is for that Naga being. It's a snap of a finger, no time at all. Here's another one, just like that. And he sways in that timeless shimmering light and chants songs of assurance in the Bodhisattva's great coming awakening. So, revitalized and encouraged, Siddhartha Gautama strode towards the Bodhi tree. There, in the cool, soft light of the late afternoon, he met the grass cutter Sotia. For some reason, legend records particular names. This is either the truth or a wonderful literary device to make it feel like it is literally the truth that's been passed down. Either way, it creates a kind of authenticity. And this grass cutter offers the future Buddhas, he's now an ex-prince still, Siddhartha Gautama, 8 bundles of grass to serve as his mat and cushion for sitting on the ground. So the future Buddha spreads the grass at the base of the tree, seats himself in the lotus posture, and with resolve, tradition says, as deeply rooted as a mountain. This is advice in Zazen as well, to sit like a great tree or sit like a mountain, stable, rooted, and experience your practice from this very stable, solid condition. And then he announces, and here's a wonderful part of the legend, which Zen certainly upholds very seriously, or maybe sincerely is better than seriously. Though only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and my blood and flesh dry up and wither away, yet never from this seat will I stir until I have attained full enlightenment. And he pressed forward again in his seated zazen. An interesting sidelight. When we come into the Zendo, of course, we first bow. Then we walk with our hands in kinhin posture to our place. And when we come to our place, we bow, and then we turn around and we bow directly across. And what this mythologically is saying is, like the Buddha seated under the Bodhi tree, this spot, this seat, this mat, this cushion, is where I'm taking my stand, where I resolve come to awakening for the benefit of all beings. This spot is the navel of the world. This is my spot beneath the Bodhi tree. Here's where I'm making my stand. We bow to our place before we sit because we're honoring our aspiration to awake for the benefit of all beings. And then we turn because unlike the Buddha, who had to do this alone, we have others. We have a Sangha. We have a Zendo dedicated to this. And so we turn and we bow straight across, recognizing that what we do in what we're doing helps others, but also we are tremendously helped by the practice of others. We're not alone. And of course, when the Buddha created originally the order out of his Sangha, out of his deep realization, there were three jewels: Buddha, our own mind; Dharma, our understanding; Sangha, the community of those we practice with. These are the three jewels, and each one of them is really important. So we turn and we bow to Sangha. This is part of a tradition, and each little movement has a symbolic resonance that I think adds to depth to our practice. So it's not just a psychological, I'm going to sit here and make myself better. There's a sense of a living tradition that's come down to us that has meaning. So anyway, he sits there, and this is then, the night is coming on, and he's doing Zazen through the 7th into the morning of the 8th. And in that night, this is where that great kind of mythic scene of the Buddha surrounded by all these demons, perhaps you've seen that, is expressed. And here's how it goes. Many visions arose. Makyo, especially if you do a 7-day sesshin, there are periods where all kinds of things will pass through your mind. Makyo, uncanny states, uncanny conditions. You just continue on with your practice. And of course, all these things pass through like a dream. And of course, there's an ancient wisdom. We even find it in popular songs. Our very life is a dream from a certain perspective. Anything other than pure realization is a dream. The ultimate, the reality, get this, the reality is enlightened mind, selfless, non-dual. So in many ways, our whole life, this life we live inside our skull, is just like an extended dream. It's quite odd, isn't it? And yet traditions and folk tales and popular songs around the world all point to this. In any case, many visions arose, fearsome and foul, as well as seductive and pleasant. All the forces of life's clinging to states of joy, comfort, and ease came swaying to him in the form of 3 women, the 3 beautiful daughters of Mara, the tempter. They danced before him, offering exquisite pleasure and comfort, while all life's terrors, fears of death and suffering, of hell's horrors, pain, ugliness, the unknown, mobbed him, shrieking of torment, deformity, of all manner of terrible and disgusting experience should he persist. Mara's army descended upon him, horse-headed, 10-eyed, tiger-faced, many-armed, with faces in their chests, with sharp yellow teeth and blood-dripping mouths, with spiders for hands, hissing, with adders' tongues. On they came, heaving stones, knives, and spears, hurling flaming discs, mud and filth. Screaming madly, they whirled down upon him like a flock of hunger-maddened crows, wildly striving to peck and tear the slightest scraps of nourishment from a huge, smooth stone. And they could not. Then Mara, the tempter, approached the future Buddha, and assuming the voice of Gautama's own innerness, the habit voice of his own thoughts, began to question the future Buddha with these words: "Are you sure you're the one? Sure you have this Buddha nature? Sure you are worthy of coming to supreme enlightenment today? Right now? Think of it. Supreme enlightenment, supreme enlightenment. You? Really?" The future Buddha only touched the earth lightly with his right hand and asked the earth to witness for him. And the earth replied with 100, 1,000, 100,000 voices, the voices of furrows and graves, voices of youth and age, of man, woman, and child, the unheeded cries of beasts, the quick, unknown, silvery language of fish, the sweet twinings of plants, and the warm, gray crumblings of stone. For all were one voice now thundering, "He is worthy." There's not one spot on this globe where he has not offered himself totally, selflessly, through endless lifetimes, to the attainment of enlightenment and the welfare of all living beings. Mara and his hosts dropped their weapons and fled. His daughters prostrated and asked forgiveness. His great war elephant, mountain-girded was its name, supposedly, the lumbering vehicle of ego's prideful strength, came crashing to the ground like a heap of stones before the man seated quietly and intensely before him. Alone, beneath the Bodhi tree, the future Buddha pressed on, endlessly on, without stopping anywhere, arousing deeper and deeper practice without cease, swallowing the darkness with his own light until with the dawn his mind rose clear and radiant and obvious as the daybreak. And when he glanced at the morning star, he found enlightenment itself, crying out, "Wonder of wonders." Intrinsically, all living beings are Buddhas, endowed with wisdom and virtue. It was December 8th. He was 35 years of age and had broken through to what others as yet had only half dreamed. The path had been reopened. The Dharma was once again accessible to the efforts of humans and devas, that's gods. In the steadily rising morning light, a supreme Buddha now sat beneath the suddenly blossoming tree. So that's the story, that's the legend. That's where Zen really begins. What I just read you was an edited version of something that was a fuller account of the Buddha's enlightenment, which I originally wrote back in 1972 or 3, based on traditional sources. And the version that I created, I gave to Roshi Kapleau, who then turned it into the Enlightenment ceremony, which is now done, as part of the Enlightenment ceremony, which is now done at all Zen centers, temples, and zendos worldwide that are connected with the Kapleau lineage. So that's a piece of mine that's kind of become part of ritual, at least in Kapleau lineage, of what is now Zen in the West. So let's talk about this from a perspective of practice. It's a lovely legend. It's a more than lovely legend. It's a moving legend. Enlightenment is both the distant goal as well as the daily beating heart of Zen. Gaining calm and experiencing peace is good, but if mindfulness and calm were all that Siddhartha sought, he'd never have needed to leave home. 2,500 years ago, the billboards were up everywhere, all over town. Get your calm on here. It was a standard practice. It was accessible to everyone. But it wasn't enough for him. Having personally experienced the terrors of impermanence, seen with his own eyes the insubstantiality of every person, everything, a fire was lit in his heart, his brain, his gut. Now, the impulse to go beyond habitual limits, beyond whatever we may naively call the world, is universal. It's not something owned by Buddhist tradition or by Zen at all. In fact, fairy tales make use of it a great deal. James Stevens, in his terrific book, Irish Fairy Tales, wrote, "If you keep on driving a pig or a story, they will get at last to where you wish them to go. And the man who keeps putting one foot in front of the other will leave his home behind and will come at last to the sea and the end of the world." That's from Irish Fairy Tales, the story Mongun's Frenzy. So he's not talking or only talking about standing at a cliff's edge looking down at the surge and tumult of waves crashing below. The ending of the world can be right where we are. It could be while talking on the phone, sitting in the zendo, cooking a meal, brushing your teeth, walking the dog. Of course, By this, I don't mean apocalypse and bombs falling from the sky. The ending of the world. What does that mean, anyway? The Buddha left his ancient palatial home of the habitual unconscious mind and kept going on and on through dark forests, over high mountains, until he came at last to the end of all that old and suffering world. What did he find? What did he see when he glanced at the morning star? Or maybe what didn't he see? Wherever we are, whatever we may have realized or not realized, like the Buddha, we too can keep going to the ending of the world. In Wind, Sand, and Stars, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote about asking a fellow male pilot, a man whose fortitude he deeply admired, about how he'd survived a crash in the frozen heights of the Andes. His badly frostbitten, beyond exhausted friend answered from his hospital bed, that all he knew is that whenever he came to the end of his strength, he took another step. What saves a man, wrote Saint-Exupéry, is to take a step, let's say a person, make it less gender-driven. What saves a person is to take a step and then another step. It is always the same step, but you have to take it. The practice doesn't change. It's always the same. The same. The same. The same breath. We take it again and again. It's always the same step. Let go of habitual loops of thought. Let them go on. Return to the practice again and again. It is always the same step, but you have to take it. Thinking about practicing Zen is not the same as actually doing it, which means sitting down to it again and again every day. Steadiness is all. The essence has been said of genius, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. We do the work, and then we keep on doing the work. Kensho, intimately glimpsing the vast, pure, infinite, empty, eternal ground of mind, of what simply is not the end of our road, but really it's a deepening of its beginning. It's like opening a long-forgotten door. We walk through it and exclaim, "Aha! The ground has always been beneath my feet." And then we continue on, knowing now where we actually stand, having gotten a glimpse of where we've actually been all along. It's a beginning. In the Jataka tales, the Bodhisattva, or Buddha-to-be, reveals that in those past lives, many of them, he woke to selflessness, to the identity of form and emptiness, and to one degree or another to original, non-dual, true nature. But it wasn't complete. It faded, it leaked, became entangled with old self-centered ways. Though clearly milestone moments, they were not yet full realization of original mind, original Buddhahood, which is the birthright of us all. It's hard to believe, but that's what Buddhist tradition says. This is the birthright of each of us. So wherever the Bodhisattva, the one destined to become the Buddha of our world cycle, was born, no matter in what form or station of life, no matter what challenging issues he faced, and in fact many of the Jatakas reveal his challenges, including his failures, which I think is a terrific thing for a religious tradition to reveal the failures of the founder. It doesn't always put him up on a pedestal. I think that's pretty great. I think that's one of the things that drew me to Buddhist tradition. Maybe two things. One was a vow to liberate all living beings, not even just human beings, not even people of my background, but all living beings. And the second was, I think, the honesty of the Jatakas, which revealed the Buddha had to work at it for quite a long time, and that he failed at times and had to pick himself up, apologize, and try again. I think that's pretty great as a model uh, for what we're working on and trying to do. So no matter what challenging issues he faced, he always chose to continue on over the next hill, beyond the next river, through the next dark forest, across the next dry desert. And of course, if you've practiced for a long time, you'll be knowing all of those things, including the dry desert, where your practice seems fruitless, nothing's happening, you just keep working at it. There's not a drop of water or a blade of green grass, and you just keep working at it. There are deserts, but there are rivers too, and there are mountains with incredible views from the top, and you just keep going. Onward further was his nature as it is ours, which is why the Tao is called the way or the path. It's practice realization is not static. It's not, oh, okay, I've got this. No, it's a process. It's a road that continues endlessly. Wherever we are now, we can always take another step. Roshi Kapleau used to say that challenges and obstacles and we all know we'll have plenty of those. Life is full of challenges and obstacles. But he said they're like hurdles for a runner. In the end, they help the runner run faster, dig deeper. Same with the challenges and obstacles we face in life. Each is an opportunity to deepen, to become more in touch with our humanity and find the solutions that we're truly capable of, not just our habitual responses and reactions. Zazen opens up that door to that kind of possibility, rather than just, oh, it's a hurdle, oh, it's an obstacle. Instead, it's a way we can grow, because you'll begin to see your own reactions are often quite primitive, and there may be another solution if you really touch base with your real nature, something you hadn't seen before, a way to deal with this. There's a great optimism in this. The key to continuing is our vow to awake to our own nature and be of benefit to all beings. These are our great vows that we recite at the end of every formal round of Zazen. Keep these vows in mind. If you do nothing else, liturgically speaking, but do these great vows and do Zazen daily, you'll be touching base with the real foundation, the core of what Zen practice is. The many beings are numberless, I vow to free them all. Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, I vow to abandon them all. Dharma gates are countless, I vow to wake to them all. Buddha's way is unattainable, I vow to embody it all. We actualize these bodhisattva vows through steady practice. Think of it like paddling a canoe. If paddling steadily, we easily move forward. With consistency, there's momentum. But if we stop, we drift, and then we have to really dig in to get going again. Consistency is commitment. To actually do it every day is to take another step and not fall into, oh, I sat yesterday, so I'll skip sitting today. Or often this post-sesshin malaise, which is kind of like, oh, I sat for days of sesshin, so I don't need to sit for a couple of days. No. That sesshin is gone. It's absorbed into the you who you are now. Now you, this you, who did the sesshin, continue sitting daily. Take another step. Zen Buddhism reveres the story of the Buddha's enlightenment because it so dramatically reveals our own potential, even as it reveals the determined, dedicated work that underlies all milestone experiences. And it isn't that things simply just get better and better. Roshi Kapleau used to say, We are always evolving and devolving according to causes and conditions. So even after lifetimes of sustained effort, in the final hours of his exertions, the ex-prince Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha to be, found himself mired in despair. It wasn't like, oh, I've been sitting for years and every day is just better and better, or I've been sitting in sesshin for days now and every day just should be better and better. No. Right at the end of this whole period, when he's about to be on the real threshold of complete realization, he hits despair. I think that's a very realistic assessment. He was devastated to discover that his terribly willful asceticism had not clarified a thing, but only left him in a dark and useless place. And then, get this, he just lets it go. He doesn't sit there beating himself up. He realizes his error, and he does an about face and eats the food he's been generously offered. And even though the ex-prince sat, in the end, simply sitting and doing zazen wasn't enough. There had to be a trigger to his realization. And it didn't come from just looking within. Looking within is the groundwork. It's like the tilling of the soil, but it's not yet awakening. It could have been a word, a sound, anything really, for his mind was ripe. And what does ripe mean? It means empty of fixed notions, of set assumptions, of conditioned habitual limits. So after a long night of focused zazen, facing all these challenges, demons, obstructions, upsurging of his own unconscious, all the primitive stuff of self-centeredness and greed and lust and all of it, that's facing through all of that. After a long night of zazen, going through all of that, to the very bottom, he glanced up and saw the morning star, and suddenly, gone, entirely gone. That's it. He fell completely away. Dogen says, body and mind dropped away. That his concepts of it drop away. And then a morning star sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Star, just star. An interesting, this profound point we actually have fun with in a lot of the introductory koans. There's a wonderful playfulness in Zen practice that allows us to take these very serious moments and bring them alive in a personal kind of way. In any case, it need not be so dramatic. A poem of Li Po's from ancient China titled Zazen on Qingting Mountain goes like this. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. But before his his dropping away experience, the Buddha wasn't just squatting there like a frog on a lily pad. He was seated solidly as a mountain, rooted as a tree, absorbed in just this breath, alert as a cat at a mouse hole. When Mara appeared, he didn't get tangled up in his challenge, but he didn't ignore it either. When situations arise in our lives, we can't go off and sit until they're gone. We need to respond, to act. It need not be a big deal. In fact, it'd be wise not to make it, whatever it is, a big deal. The Buddha simply touched the earth and asked the earth to witness for him. He didn't try to muster up a list of excellent reasons with which to out-argue Mara and prove his worth. He did exactly what was right and was also just enough. There's truth in the final obstacle being self-doubt. In a sense, self-doubt is what all obstacles come down to. Self-doubt is so pervasive that even when passed on an initial koan, we can fall into it. What? Can it be? Really? That's it, we may think, as long-standing habits of mind return. But it need not be an obstacle if we simply accept it as another Dharma gate to which we vowed to wake. Legend says that even after his great enlightenment, the Buddha doubted whether he could teach what he had realized, doubted whether it was something that could even be taught at all. It was so simple, it was immediate, it was clear, either you saw it or you didn't. From the perspective of his opened mind's eye, what others were there to teach. It said then that the gods stepped in again, the same gods who'd motivated him to leave home, and reminding him of his bodhisattva vows. And then that was when he got up from under the Bodhi tree, took up the teacher's mantle, and first began to teach. So he first faced doubt whether he could do this, whether it could even be taught. Buddhist tradition says that we all have the nature of Buddha, have exactly the same vast, empty nature of endlessly creative and compassionate potential as Shakyamuni Buddha and all previous and future Buddhas. Each one of us. No one has less. No one has more. From the first, we are each fully and equally endowed with wisdom and virtue. And because it is already who we are, if we practice, if we make sincere efforts, then we too can, to one degree or another, because we all have our karma, we all have our habits, we all have our psyches, we all have our psychology, we all have our issues. We can, to one degree, we're not Shakyamuni Buddha, we're not the ex-prince Siddhartha Gautama. We're who each of us is. We each have the same potential, but we each will realize to whatever degree we're capable of in this life. We can awake to our own original mind. It's not more complete in the most realized Buddha, and it's not lesser in anyone who has no care or interest in practice whatsoever. We're talking about our own nature. We each can wake to our own nature. What could be more ordinary, really? But we will not simply float into it. As Japanese Zen master Ikkyu, great iconoclast, his dates are 1394 to 1481, said, there is no natural Shakyamuni. In other words, though we're already it, we won't realize it unless we work at it. And there's the paradox. If we already are it, why must we work so hard to realize what we already are? That's what drove Zen Master Dogen so nuts as a young man, as a young monk. He thought, if as the Buddha proclaimed upon his great enlightenment, all beings are Buddha, why did all the sages of the past have to sweat blood to know it? Why can't we just float into it? Like drifting downstream on a sunny day. How come, if it's our own nature, we have to work so hard to wake to it? Why indeed? Dogen's anguished lack of peace forged a deep resolve that in the end led him to great peace. We too will not know real peace until we're willing to look directly and unflinchingly into our own unpeace and its causes. Zen says, if you want to know gold, you must see it in the midst of fire. There's no way to leap over the difficulties and get to some idyllic place called enlightenment. Faith and courage may be two words, but they really might mean the same thing. So, there's a lot more pages in this chapter in the book, but I don't think I'll read them to you. Not to promote myself as an author, but if you get the book, you can read them yourself. Let's see if there's a way to close this, though, that the last couple of pages really talk about self-doubt in greater detail. And so that's an important point, that the Buddha himself faced self-doubt at the very end. Again, we won't go into that at the moment, but let's see if there's a way to sum this up. Okay, we can use this as our conclusion for the teisho. What builds solid ground beneath us, turning to the earth, Mother Earth, responding, testifying to the Buddha's worthiness, to awaken fully in this very moment, right now. What builds solid ground beneath us is the work we do now. This is where and how we touch ground. This breath, this count, this koan, this pain in the knee, this call of the crow. Roshi Kapleau used to say, and I'm going to repeat this because I think it's a really important thing. People can get fearful about making certain kinds of efforts in their practice or signing up for sesshin, whatever it is. Roshi Kapleau used to say over and over again, if you don't let the Dharma down, the Dharma will never let you down. If you don't let the Dharma down, if you keep at it, keep doing your best, keep persevering, the Dharma will never let you down. He believed that absolutely. He experienced that absolutely. All his teaching grew out of that. Remember, he had been the chief court reporter for the Nuremberg and the Tokyo war crimes tribunals. He took down the testimony of some of the worst crimes of human beings perpetrated against human beings ever known in history. It drove him, like the Buddha as a young man, into practice. It really wiped away the life he had before taking down that testimony and gave him the fortitude to go to Japan, to live in a very meager way for somebody used to Western comforts in order to gain true understanding. If you don't let the Dharma down, the Dharma will never let you down. He also used to add that no sincere effort is ever wasted. Every effort we make, though it may not bear fruit immediately, one day becomes a source of great strength that we'll draw on. Because this is so, because nothing is hidden, because enlightenment is intimacy, not cleverness, not knowledge of anything special, but is our own nature. Because this is so, this is just fact, this is just true. Each of us already has the potential to wake to it. And touching the earth is always possible because our own real ground is never far away. And neither is a star. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.